It's been almost a month since Squad announced the Infantry Combat Overhaul, the new, upcoming, and game-changing update which will add picture-in-picture optics, completely new suppression effects, and make all weapon handling and character movement slower, more tactical, and less like a quick-scoping twitch shooter. Now, as much as I loved the first playtest and the immersive team play it created, the second was incredibly disappointing. And if you missed my review video on that, I've linked it in the top right of your screen here, but essentially it removed a lot of the previous reliance on suppression, making it easier for players to fire back at machine guns and kill you with 1 or 2 shots while being suppressed, which kinda defeated the whole purpose of the overhaul. Many people were actually pretty upset with the direction the devs were going with playtest 2, but fortunately the seemingly lack of suppression was actually due to a bug. As a member of the Squad Partner Program, I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk with the devs, and they often chat with me about things that I can't really share with y'all, but sometimes we talk about things I can share with y'all. And through one of these conversations with a dev who would like to remain nameless, I learned that there was a bug which indirectly reduced suppression in playtest 2. Due to some complaints on the insane kick and poor weapon handling while point firing during the first playtest, the devs reduced the recoil for the weapons when not ADS'd in order to make point firing more accurate. Unfortunately, this accidentally also reduced the ADS recoil for these weapons as well, which meant that if you were being suppressed in playtest 2, it really didn't feel like you were, since you were able to keep your weapon incredibly stable and hit accurate shots due to this recoil bug. I want to reiterate that suppression values were actually very similar between playtests 1 and 2, but since the main counter to players using picture-in-picture scopes is to make it harder for them to hit their shots due to all the recoil and sway, a bug which will remove those recoil penalties will make longer range scopes incredibly deadly under suppression, so suppression as a whole was actually much less impactful. I saw this screenshot being tossed around in a few discords and Reddit where Virus, who is an awesome squad dev and one of the leads in the Infantry Combat Overhaul, stated that suppression values were nearly the same. And I'm not trying to say he is wrong in any way. He's actually 100% correct, and I'm pretty sure he's like the one guy who actually implemented these changes. But it just appears that this bug reducing the recoil for ADS went unnoticed until the devs were analyzing feedback and data after playtest 2, which might have explained the long break between playtest 2 and 3 in order to give themselves some time to find the issue and fix it. So in summary, if you felt like playtest 2's suppression was bad, you weren't crazy. The whole thing was actually bugged. Now, with the bug sorted out and quite a large portion of the community agreeing that playtest 1 just felt better, the devs announced playtest 3 for this past weekend, which actually just ended. But the question remains, is Squad on track to live up to their aim for an immersive team play oriented game, or are we going back to a more arcadey playstyle? First off, suppression was changed to fall more in line with the original playtest 1 values, and the patch notes state that the minimum suppression % required to trigger suppression visual effects was reduced. This means that the suppression blur would actually happen sooner and would happen with less incoming fire. And they also reduced the suppression percentage at which the visual effects appeared at their maximum, meaning that suppression would reach max level sooner as well. So in short, you're gonna get suppressed. Now, despite this, a lot of people have been actually posting that they felt as if playtest 3 was moving away from the original idea of the Infantry Combat Overhaul, as this user posted on Reddit stating that playtest 3 just felt more like regular Squad. However, after playing a lot of games over the past few days, I think I actually know why some of y'all might be feeling this. Although suppression causes depth of field effects and essentially forces you to focus on your direct front, as indicated by this firefight from the very first playtest, this blurring does not happen if you are ADS'd while using a picture-in-picture scope like the ACOG or 1P78. As indicated by the original blog post, and as we mentioned earlier, when using these scopes, you actually get hit with a lot of weapon sway. So as I was playing this weekend and originally agreeing with people who thought playtest 3 didn't have suppression because I'm not seeing all this blur, without realizing it, I've actually gone back towards primarily using ACOGs and picture-in-picture optics. I think the initial shock I had in using these new scopes and managing the weapon handling has actually now worn off quite a bit, and whereas the first playtest I felt forced into using red dots because I just couldn't hit anything, I am now comfortable with these new scopes. I've slowed down my playstyle a bit, I try to stabilize for a second before taking shots when I'm ADS, but because of all this, I haven't really noticed the suppression blur in firefights as much since the magnified optics do not give you the same overwhelming depth of field blur. To confirm, I actually had to go back through all of my recorded footage and I found this firefight where I used the saw without the optic. Our position was getting overrun and I just laid down the trigger trying to fire in the general direction. But as soon as I started to fire back, a grenade goes off, which suppresses me and causes that depth of field blur because I wasn't using the picture-in-picture optic. To compare, here's a firefight where I'm taking incoming rounds from a Blackhawk door gunner, and as you can see, while I'm ADS'd, I'm getting that weapon sway and recoil punch instead of blur, with the only actual screen distortion coming from my weapon firing when it's in burst. So suppression 100% still does happen in Playtest 3, and I'd argue it's almost the same, if not exactly the same as Playtest 1, which is a huge win in my book. But since many people are now comfortable using picture-in-picture optics, you might not be noticing it as much. If you're running around non-ADS'd or you're using red dots, you will definitely see that blur. So with that being said, I think the devs are right back on track with suppression. There were plenty of immersive moments where I was on the wrong end of a machine gun or vehicle and it made me feel trapped, with my only options being wait it out or hope some friendlies can support me. There are also moments where squad mates asked me to provide suppression by calling out targets and marking them with fireteam marks. And by laying into a general area, it allowed them to flank and push and take the enemy out. Overall, I just felt like we had that team play aspect of suppression back, which was great to see. So with suppression out of the way, one of the biggest changes to this new playtest was the stamina overhaul. When a player is revived and not healed, they are considered in a hurt state. And now, while hurt, your stamina will regenerate up to a maximum of 50%. Additionally, your stamina will only regen at a 33% speed until you are healed up by a medic. As a dev state, this was done in order to make the new gunplay and movement feel a little bit more manageable if you're not able to get a medic right away, but still keep it just frustrating enough to make you want to seek a medic out. Honestly, in this first iteration, I really think they just about nailed it. And stamina management had been a very real problem over the past few tests, because before, if I was down and a medic wasn't close by, I would actually consider just respawning because of how frustrating the low stamina fighting was. But these new changes now make it so that I can actually hold my own for at least a couple minutes if I needed to, which is much appreciated. Now, aside from that, there actually weren't too many other big changes. The devs did remove that experimental iron sight view for the AK-12, so now you have the basic rear iron sight that we're used to. And as much as I did think it was a little clunky, it would be cool if this was implemented or re-implemented as a variable type option for iron sight users. But honestly, that's just a minor thing, and if it's included or not in the future, I don't think it would really matter. However, there are a couple things that I still don't like. First is the new fall damage changes. I know we can no longer jump around like ninjas parkouring around the map, but I still feel like the fall damage height is way too low. And certain ledges, which might only be as tall as my character, seemingly kill me instantly, which doesn't really make too much sense. My actual frustration lies with the fact that if we can climb up to some of these spots with the vaulting mechanic, the devs should give players a way to climb down as well without jumping. Add in some sort of vault down mechanic and I think the height is okay, but please, I just want to drop down from a ledge and not have to find a medic. Additionally, I think the One Piece 7/8 optic has been extremely poorly done. I know the whole thing is supposed to have this green tint to it, but it feels as if there's a layer of gritty, sandy grease applied to the scope as well. The reticles just seem pixelated, and I just really don't enjoy shooting with it. When you compare it to the M150 ACOG, it's really just night and day, and I honestly think that if the devs keep the current iteration of the One Piece 7/8 in the game, I'll just do my own little boycott and just swap to using the One Piece 6/3 from now on. I hate it that much. Still, my biggest complaint, however, was the performance and optimization. It felt like, as a whole, the test was a lot less optimized, and I felt that on most maps, I wasn't getting the frames I usually would. Whenever I used picture-in-picture scopes now, I would also lose at a minimum of 10 FPS, with some drops like this losing almost 20, going from 86 FPS all the way down to 68. Now, I know this will most likely be fixed for future builds, but it would just generally be incredibly disappointing if you could play squad on stable frames now, but the new update would then force you to upgrade your PC just to enjoy it. So I really hope that doesn't happen. But as a whole, overall, I really liked Playtest 3. Suppression was great, and player movement with the new stamina changes was a lot of fun and felt more like Playtest 1 than 2, which was a really great feeling. I will say that personally, I'm a fan of a bit more punishing sway and weapon handling when low stamina and running around, the kind we saw in Playtest 1, but whatever we have now is obviously more fun for more people while still maintaining the type of gameplay that Squad is trying to achieve. In saying that though, I also think it's okay to sacrifice some of this realism with some odd looking mechanics if they aim to recreate authentic feelings of firefights. I'm not saying that I've ever been in a real firefight myself, because I haven't, but varying levels of sway, these blur effects, your character ducking as incoming rounds snap above them, all these unrealistic kind of weapon handling kind of shooting back into your face, all of these things are being used by the devs in order to help put you, a person sitting at a computer who is under no danger at all, in a state that is difficult to perform optimally in due to what's happening to your character in game. I think that is important to remember, and Squad is not aiming for realism, but instead simulated authentic feelings of, man, I am freaking tired from sprinting 200 yards in full gear, and now I have to shoot this rifle. When taking all of that into consideration and comparing Playtest 3 to the previous builds, I really think the devs have nearly got this update dialed into perfection. Now we just need some optimization. But what do you guys think? Is suppression back to being effective? Am I right in thinking that a lot of us are just used to the new picture-in-picture scopes now, or are you still preferring the red dots? And how do you like the new 50% stamina mechanic? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.